Okay, so the name of the presentation is related to the name of the work that I have chosen for the string quartet, which is Galatea. And I'm bringing forth the idea of music consciousness as an experience and being an important part of our consciousness. I've also got what I'm calling the theater of fire, and you could call it the sacred theater of fire. I'm trying to reference probably very old things about how music is in part of our experience. And I hope I can illuminate some of that in what I'm talking about. I'm also going to talk directly about Jeffrey Rubinoff's Series 1 sculptures, which are intended to be musical. And I've had my parts where I've been going, really? Like, really? And so it's been kind of a really interesting encounter with that to actually bring out what all of that is. And I actually think I have a clearer sense of that now than I did. And I hope I can share that with you. And those sculptures actually directly have influenced what I've been writing, but for reasons that might not be obvious or what you might think. So let's continue with this. Okay, so my approach to creating music is a little different from what's been happening in the last 75 years. So I believe the melody is avant-garde, and that's a pretty risky thing to say today. If you look at much writing about music in the 20th century, it's almost been eradicated. And definitely, something has happened. For me, it's the most important aspect of my writing, and it's something I just feel like I had to fully embrace as a composer. The next thing I would say is rhythm is the passion. It's certainly my passion, and it's something to do with the physicality of music, and it's something that is very, very, very important to me. I remember when I saw the World Drum Festival, I heard drummers from all over the world, and I'm a cello player, and this is my background. And I had a kind of, road to Damascus conversion experience where I was, and I studied with an African master drummer for 3 years in Vancouver, a remarkable person. I was trying to reorder my neurons doing that and just change myself fundamentally as a musician. And I've had a huge amount of experience with the interaction of cultures with each other. And Vancouver is a very important place for that because I was in this whole community of people who were, from various parts of the world who didn't have enough of a community to make the music work or with what they were doing. So they had to work together and work cross-culturally because you just weren't enough people to support you just by yourself. So I was working for quite a number of years with an Indian, she's an Indian, South Indian Bharatanatyam classical dancer. I wrote for her. And that was an amazing experience just to learn about Indian culture. And what an amazing musician she was because she could, with her feet, she could do all this incredible musicality. She studied as a musician just with what she did with her feet. And the respect that I had for her was just extraordinary, and still have. One of the most amazing people I've ever met. The audience matters. One of the things that's happened in the 1950s and 1960s was almost complete rejection of the audience. And my view is the audience is profoundly important now because we have, I think, the most important audience. Like we're in an inflection point in history at a very profound level, contextually in terms of where we are. And so every one of us is incredibly important. And so the idea of rejecting the audience as being unimportant and there's only a little group of specialists who know what's important about music, I think that's I think it's irrelevant. And so the other thing I say is the audience matters and so does the story. And for me, when I'm writing music, I feel like I'm writing stories in music. And part of what I'm trying to do in my presentation today is actually explain how I express a story in music and how this can work. And again, when I was in music school, and I would talk about music as a language, I would be getting all these knowing looks and saying, tut, tut, Paul, you don't really know what you're talking about. And now it's like they finally, like there's been enough science of music now that the idea of the narrative and the idea of music as a language of emotion is right now really a very strong view, even though we all knew it anyway. But we kind of needed the scientists to prove it, which is unfortunate. So that's sort of my approach here. And I'm going to talk about the context of the world we're living in right now. This is a quote from Jeffrey Rubinoff. Basically, he's saying that our survival depends on the rationality pervading amongst competitive nations and hegemonies. Stability exists only moment to moment, and the necessity for indefinite, continued rationality amongst the inconsistent bodies has had no historical precedence. He's got a point there, because let's go, these guys. They're in charge of the nuclear arsenal. And we know that there's a lot of things in the news right now about nuclear stuff. So this I also think is a context that a lot of us, I don't think, get enough. And I bring this up because I feel that the impact of human beings on the planet is not fully understood. This is from the Stockholm Resilience Institute. The most important person here is Johan Rockström, who's, I believe, he's at the Max Planck Institute now, and advises the UN. They worked out 9 planetary boundaries. Within these planetary boundaries, human beings can really thrive on the planet effectively. And it took them a long time to really quantify the boundaries. And by the time they got it quantified, 2023, there are 9 boundaries, which cost 6 of them. I can't explain in detail what it's all about, but I highly encourage you to take a look at this, because you can see climate change is just one of these factors. One down here is extremely important here. Biogeochemical flows. We're talking about potassium and nitrogen. I think for us to appreciate what our farming does to the world is extremely important. So I think this whole question of context as artists is really important for us. But it's also important for everyone, whether you're an artist or not. It's like we kind of need to know our impact on the world. So I am now returning to a poem that means a lot to me. This is The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats, and it was written in 1919. And this is a connection to the spiritual in art. Turning and turning in the widening gyre. Sorry. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And for me, this line here, the falcon cannot hear the falconer, I cannot explain it's weird that in poetry, it's in words, I should be able to explain it. I should be able to understand it. And that I can only understand it intuitively. But it means a lot to me. And this, the ceremony of innocence, also is what I feel like I'm trying to write. So the project themes, I'm calling it wasn't originally a Galatea project, but this was the themes. Energy, consciousness, connection. This is a description of music. in music, we have an instrument, an acoustic instrument. Our hands, I mean, it's the very act of design is a form of consciousness. The energy of our hands, the sound waves are, if I hit that instrument, to create that instrument, those sound waves are my energy. So it's a real sharing of my energy, so everybody around me, through that translation of or transformation of my energy into sound waves. That energy that hits your ears, it's my energy. But where does my energy come from? It's the interesting question. Consciousness is forming the decisions that make that sound. So the music is embedded with consciousness, and it's for connection. So I think it's really important. This is an object that I created, but music is about the physicality and the feeling of the human beings who are making music. It's way beyond any particular object. And what has happened in the 20th century is we tried to more and more and more turn music into objects. So that's my interpretation. I found, as I was doing the project, that the new theme that came up was transformation, metamorphosis, but really transformation. And I think you'll see as we go along what that means. This is the sculpture Galatea. It is by Auguste Rodin. And I don't want to go into too much detail about Pygmalion and Galatea, but basically the idea of a sculpture coming to life is something becoming conscious. When I read the Ovid's poem in translation, I found it bizarrely reminded me of somebody's relationship with an AI avatar, something that's not alive, that's being obsessed with, and in a very kind of bizarre way. But Rodin, so people have interpreted this sculpture as Rodin. This is Rodin himself, because he saw himself as the sculpture, that he was bringing the sculptures to life. That's how he saw himself. And so this is maybe partly a sort of portrait of how he felt about it. It's just one object. That's got this deep kind of resonance with us at the same time, because of its history and everything like that. So this idea of metamorphosis, the idea of animation, to become alive and conscious, is something that happens to all of us. It's our birth, in a sense. So these are the musical sculptures of Jeffrey Rubinoff. And what I actually, when I've been thinking about it, is this question of proportion in them is so strong. They're supposed to be like notes, but they're supposed to be like music. But to say they're like notes is not a really good way of describing it. What I found was extraordinary, and I think other musicians have gone through this. Is that true? That musicians react to them. So I have that. As soon as you see them, and then it's really quite bizarre that they have such an extraordinary sound qualities to them, and that I don't know whether Jeffrey intended that. But as a musician, I have this very strong reaction to them as sound objects, especially because this whole thing of action and music, it's your hand playing them, and you create this powerful sound. And so, actually, I just want to mention one thing right now. In my own melodies, it's almost like if you take this and you turn it on the side, I tend to do a long introductory note, and then there's a cascade of other notes that happen. And it's kind of like they go like this, and then there's this kind of moment of cascade. And I'm noticing in the sculptures that these cascades of these ones that I call the onesies, they're because they remind me of Cuisinart rods, but the sculptures are almost impossible because they're all kind of like sort of suspended in space. They're kind of quite bizarre in that way. And I think what it is that it's I think you may have felt the sense of notes cascading, and that the reason why they're so kind of suspended in space in this impossible way, maybe a kind of a response to inside of himself to these beautiful things that happen in music. But if you kind of look at them, I mean, you can kind of do this thing of going around the sculptures, but if you kind of feel the sense of something progressing and going through like that, and falling and cascading and rising, I think that that's sort of a big part of the musicality of that, of the sculptures. That's how I now interpret it. And I do love the relationship to the natural world. So I have to tell you that's my favorite right there. And I went around all the sounds, and this one here, the relationship happens as a musician, you kind of really invest yourself in the sound. And so it's not rational. You just play them and you feel your response to them, and they start acquiring a meaning for you. And I found going back and forth between these, and sometimes they would evoke very dark emotions in me, and and so you're going back and forth between them. It has a big impact on you. So this is a quote from a book by Ian McGilchrist. Was the instruments of the musical variety, which are not actually instrumental in the philosophical sense, have repeatedly been found to sort in the brain, not with inanimate objects and tools, but in the right hemisphere with living things. So our conscious mind knows they're not alive, but they found through various types of brain studies where they suppress one or other side of the brain. I've sort of looked up the studies they talked about there, and basically, if you cannot list living things, you cannot list musical instruments. And it means that some kind of really ancient part of the structure of our mind and our music consciousness sees musical instruments as being alive. And he says here, musicians not only manipulate instruments like separate object, but lives, like a limb, inhabits the musical expressive space of them. It's like you're living in it. And that's very much the feeling I had when I was with the sculptures, that it was like I hit them, and then it's like I could feel the evolution of the sound, and I could feel myself going into this kind of sort of expression. And even listening to it doesn't really, if you listen to what I did, it's not really the same thing as you actually doing it, because that is what makes it animate for you. So what I'm talking about is basically that the sculptures are becoming alive because I'm playing them as musical instruments. So I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what I was doing. I don't really have much pride in the way I played them when I recorded them, and I kind of I don't think I did a very good edit and all this kind of technical stuff that's along there, but I can give you an idea of a bit of what it sounds like, and then something happens at the end. And actually, what's really interesting, first time I was here in January, I had this really intense rhythmic response to the sculptures. And when I came back, I was sort of, I don't know, been there, done that slightly. I worked with them. That was, by the way, Limber Age at the far end, or if you're listening to. But then I found myself listening to the birds a huge amount. And so I really wanted to skip the raven, the last word there. So, now what's going on here? Yeah. So, I'm kind of saying, if you play the sculptures as a musical instrument, as if they're gongs, do they come alive? So it's like, that's the reason why I'm using the word Galatea. It's like something that's inanimate coming alive. What's going on? Well, there we go. Now, this is a little bit of my composition. I'm going to play my composition. So it's called Galatea. I would like to point out, now, there is no pointer on this thing? Okay. I may have to sort of, I actually have a diagram of the piece that I'm going to show later. If you look at this, you see, that's the same note, right? Okay, notice it rises right here. And then it goes back. And there's kind of a shape here. I call this the chorale. It's a bit like a vocal piece of music. But I want you to be able to hear in the music this little moment here. As this rises here, there's a note that goes down here. It's like it's not much, but it actually changes the harmony quite profoundly. You're going to hear this kind of thing here transformed through the work. And the way to notice it's there is because there's this little moment in music. And I'm going to put up my fingers and go like 2, because there's 2 notes. So I'm going to go 2, and then you just notice it. And it's very important in the symbolism of the music. Okay, now the way piece evolves, it starts with an intro. That chorale is there. Then we have the first violin is going to play some melodies, because melodies were important to me. And you're going to hear those 2 kind of as a response. You'll hear the melody, and then you hear those the 2, right? And then there's a transition up, and you're going to hear the chorale again, and it's been moved up in the pitch, and it's really much louder. And the violin plays something different over it, but it's still the same thing that's been moved up. And I just want you to appreciate that's what's going on in music. Then there's another transition, and then there's that chorale is then up high, and it's creating this kind of, I think, a very spiritual space in the music. And what's very important here is the viola and the cello are just, the viola comes down, and then the cello answers and comes up in this very high, very up to this high elevated space. And there's this process where it changes key, and when it changes key, you feel this tension, and then suddenly this kind of, you're in a new world game. And it's subtle, but it's kind of the thing that we need to kind of learn how to listen to in music, is these kind of subtleties. And it goes through 3 keys that are not the most obvious that they would go through. It ends with the cello here, really expressing, the cello is extremely expressive through this whole section. And it sort of ends in D, and then the violin goes up way high all by itself, descends down, and you have what I would call magic chords. I'm not going to explain technically why they had that effect. You'll hear the cello plucking the instrument, and it's very still. And then you'll hear that chorale again transformed. It's the same thing, and you'll notice it again because of these 2 notes that stand out. Then so that happens, there's a tiny break, and then everything changes. And you have I kind of add 1 beat to the bar line, like this, it becomes kind of extended, and it sort of changes everything. Something happens that's very important in music is that 1 line goes down, the cellos are going down, and the violin goes up, and there's this kind of sense of things spreading out. And then there's a rise up. It's very dramatic, and it comes up to this high point, and you feel like, where is this going to go? And then then what I do is I make a change into the way the scale that they're using. I add a note to the scale between the octave, and it compresses everything, and everything suddenly radically changes, and everything dramatically falls down, and every instrument goes to its absolutely lowest note. And they're using it's a compressed kind of music. Everything is compressed together, and it creates a certain tension. Then there's these, they call it pizzicato Italian, but it's the whole string quartet is playing these violent chords. And what's really important in terms of the cave is that there's an implication there that there's an echo that they're echoing into. And that echo into it is almost like a question. And you have to kind of see it that way. And this friend of mine said that it was like somebody was in a prison and is sort of banging on the cage. And so these chords here are a little derived from this compressed scale. So it's a very stark kind of effect. And then, and there's a moment here where I'm using a rhythm that's very unusual, and it came out of my head, and when I finally wrote it down, I went, how did I hear it in 11/8 time? But that's unusual musically. And so that happens there. And then we have the return, and this return is one of the most important parts of the music. And we get the chorale again, but the return has a lot of feeling in it. The chorale, we have the violin melodies again, a transition, and then at the end, we have the first and the violin. If you were in a live performance, you would hear them duetting back and forth. One plays one melody, one plays the other. That has quite a strong effect on people emotionally if they can see that. But it's hard to hear it in the demo. And then there's another rise, and there's a definite relationship between this rise and this rise and what it means. Now, I will try and kind of have my finger here pointing out where we are in the music. So because that description probably would be like, oh, I can't follow that. And even if you hear something like this, you might not realize what you're listening to. And so by sort of pointing about where you are in the music, it helps you with the map. So hopefully it will play now. And by the way, what you're hearing here is a semi-AI rendition of it. It's not like the string quartet would truly sound. It's synthetic. It's got some good qualities to it. It's a bit disturbing that it can be as good as it is. And in about 3 or 4 years, I could hand over my score to an AI, and it will sound like a Borealis String Quartet, and I could actually specify who it is, and I'm not happy about this. I think there's real problems with it. Okay? Sorry. What?
This is a 14-minute piece.
Yeah.
To make everyone's comfortable.
Yeah. Okay. Now that's actually an issue because music is not normally 14 minutes long. And I think often people go like, oh, yeah, maybe something by Miles Davis and it's a 14-minute improvisation. I mean, there's a lot of work to do in your head. And that's why I've done this, is because I'm just trying to say that it is complex to listen to. It actually requires a lot of cognition to put together large, long pieces. And it's a form of listening that we were probably better at the past simply because we didn't have all this technology around us. So, anyway, let's listen to it.
Wow. Digital Sydney. Morris Maker.
I want to thank Karun for the opportunity to be here, and also thank the Borealis String Quartet who are going to be playing this in the summer. And it's a wonderful relationship with them. And I feel like they have a wonderful relationship with you. And I appreciate all the conversations that we've had. That means so much to me. And I find the generosity of this place extraordinary. And I've never experienced anything quite like it. So I'm very moved by it. Anyway, I think maybe I have a part of the presentation called Theater of Fire, which you could call, as I said, it's sort of a ancient sacred aspect of our humanity that I think maybe explains why we have music inside of us, and I think music is very related to ritual and this whole sense of being conscious of just how we are in the world. I don't want to. I think maybe maybe that's enough at this stage, and there's other people coming. And if people have any questions for me, maybe we could do that instead. Okay. By the way, this is the score. So if anybody wants to look at all the notes, they're all sort of here, and but it's not an object. It looks like an object, but in order to be music, it has to become transformed into people's physicality and consciousness and feelings in order to become music. And so music is not an object.
Thank you so much for showing that incredibly well. And I was thinking of Jeffrey a lot as it was playing, and I'm sure he was as well.
Well, I know there are some questions here. I want to see the record up hands out. Charles first, sorry.
That was so moving. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else noticed, but as it was playing, there was these birds just dancing as if they were moving to the music, and also like the movement in the trees. And it seems like you're making this real connection between the visual
Yes.
and sound.
Yeah.
I'm curious with the map that you showed us and all of the content that you showed earlier that you're drawing your inspiration from. Does that map tell a kind of narrative story then?
Yes. Yes. Sorry. I just want to pull that.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in the birds. And there's much. I think there's a huge amount to be learned from this, and other people looking at the soundscape and the massive there is a source for music. These things, I'm just getting them in from Peru from a person called Jose Vitancio Umares, and they are objects that were invented about 3,000 years ago, and they are not only sculptural objects that imitate birds and animals, but they are what I just said. They're sculptural objects that actually create sound, and I want to put that in the performance. So there'll be a second version of the performance where we're using these things. I've sort of developing a relationship with this really interesting guy who makes them, and I think their fragility, since the ceramic, is actually quite symbolic, because we really have to look after them.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely beautiful, really moving. You said sound object, and you just changed my consciousness totally as an art historian, because I'm thinking I'm going to see objects and perceive them and understand them in a different way, just in terms of what's their capacity for sound, even if they're not played. Mm-hmm. But it feels to me like the sculpture park is this an extraordinary soundscape, and I just wonder if there's any kind of documentation or exploration of that. Like you've explored one beautiful soundscape. Do you see this as a kind of, you're coming back?
I really agree with you, and I think that the space is it's so beautiful because it's so far, and I feel like I took a risk a little bit by playing them, and I have to tell you that one of them is really wobbly, and I started playing them, and then I just backed away from it, and you're looking very serious, Karun. So, but I actually think you could do a really imaginative and beautiful work with the sculptures. We'd have to kind of figure out what they are. But with people, I think across a very large space, and the very size of the space could be emphasized by having these sort of rhythms coming back and forth across it. And I think it also would be, a kind of thing that you would not do with professionals, because professionals have the annoying habit of having to be paid, and if you just have people learn a piece, because we can all learn how to do music, and we just we can use the space and create stuff, and we can all do this. I really feel that.
Is this where okay? That was absolutely astounding, and I feel super grateful that we were here and hearing it kind of first. It's been in your head for a while, obviously, developing and percolating.
Actually, it was about 20 days to write, and I was completely wasted afterwards.
I bet you were.
In a really weird way. I was going like something wrong with me.
That sounds surprisingly fast somehow for the elaborateness of the work. So speaks to your talent. So I don't have a question. I have two comments. One of them, I just love what you said about melody is avant-garde. Yeah. It really resonated with me because, especially in Vancouver, if any of you know Artland in Vancouver, the idea of beauty is kind of a sacrilegious word, and it's something that I try and work with in my work, in refutation of this this idea that beauty is a stigmatized word for in Artland and Vancouver,
and music too.
And music too, and I'm glad I refute that as well. Beauty is absolutely essential, and then I also you showed a slide where the you had Galatea on either side of one of Jeffrey's sculptures, and then the gongs. And I couldn't help but thinking about Rosalind Krauss's diagram of sculpture in the expanded field, which was an article she wrote in Art Forum in '67 or something like that. If you don't know it, I think this is music in the expanded field. That would be a really interesting diagram for you to see.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely your whole talk, the music especially, but so many of the ideas were just terrific and very moving. And thank you. I just have a couple of little questions. In your recording of the percussive play with the sculpture, there was a low frequency running through that. Was that the wind, or was that something?
Sometimes it was the wind. I was doing it with my iPhone, and I should have done it with a more sophisticated one, which I brought up this time because I'm going to spend some time Thursday re-recording again. Yeah. I should have had a windsock. But there's also, when you listen to the sounds, they evolve over time. There's it's sort of an interference thing that you can actually hear pitches rising in the sculptures, which is surprising in a way, because you think when it's decaying over time, it would lose energy and then the pitch would go down. But it's due to the complexity of their structure, actually, and because they don't necessarily look complex, but somehow the outcome is complex. And I don't see them being that much different from any kind of gong-type instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One other very quick question, kind of a yes or no. Would you do that workshop here?
Were you talking about playing them or?
Yeah, with people, with creating sound in the landscape here.
Absolutely. I'm really interested. I also a music teacher, and I believe that we're all super intelligent with music, and music teachers have a way of making you feel really stupid. So it's my sort of goal of trying to get over that. We're all really born musical. I have a friend who's doing a documentary on music, and his 30-second pitch is, what if I told you you had a superpower and you didn't know it? And so he's saying the music is a kind of superpower. And as they're doing more and more sort of studies in the brain, they're kind of going, how the heck do we do this? This is like amazing. But we're all doing it. Just the very act of listening is doing it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I'll look forward to that one.
Okay, great. I've really
Thank you very
enjoyed
much.
Any questions? Grace?
Yeah, we should maybe point people to the forum before the last one, though. The forum that was about sound.
Yes, 2 years ago, we had a forum on art and music, and we did have some performances in the park. And I think you might be able to some of those online. Certainly the talks are online.
Way you explain the sculptures. You say you have to, so you talked about slowing down, and you also said that you had to kind of create it yourself. You had to walk around the sculpture and create it and know and look at it. I think in music we have that same need to, I think first realizing that it can, what it is capable of communicating. I think that when you have I don't like what a lot of Adorno said about music, and I think he did some quite destructive things. But he invented the term cultural industry, and we just don't realize how we get sucked into this whole thing. And I think with the advent of stuff around 2010 or even earlier, we're just being sucked into addictive spaces where we have to have this instant kind of thing. And sometimes you have to really kind of let go of your expectations and just let something happen over in a sort of slower way. And the other thing that's really important is listening to music together and not being alone so much, because what's happened is that, they show that when people listen to music together, they feel closer to each other. And so you have to really emphasize the music is about people and the connection to each other. And we, in 100,000 years ago, we would all have been doing music together, and this would have been what kept us together. And we're kind of agreeing that we are one, even though, we have disagreements. And it's sort of, I often think of music as being a way of making peace between people. And you definitely see it across cultures. And that's one of the most interesting things to me, is the way people connect across cultures with music. But I don't know if I answered your question or deviated too much. But focus, yeah, but I think that focus helps when there's people around. When we have these things in our ears, like people say that the so-called cyberspace started with the Sony Walkman. And it was the first time you could just walk around and you had this thing in your ear. And we never did that before. And it's something to really think about.
Does any of you have questions? Oh, yes. Shorter mic. Is that either to read that?
Thank you. Of course. So my question is, thank you very much. I agree with everyone and whatever everyone said. Thank you so much. It was very moving. So my question is, what was your inspiration beside the sculpture part? Your emotional feeling. Where were you at? Thank you.
I don't actually know. When I'm writing music, it's very intense for me, and sometimes also I feel like I just get into, like, there's this other sort of space that I get into, and I found that when I have a name like Galatea, or I find a theme for the work, it's as I'm going along, it starts to become apparent to me what my theme is. But usually you can start with the tiniest gestures and just start something. And then as soon as I do that, it's a bit like with the sculpture park where you just hit one of them and then you go. And sometimes I start almost with a random musical gesture, and then it's something just seems to grow inside of me. And a lot of it is so nonverbal that getting into some kind of verbal description is a lot of work. And I think it's just coming from this music consciousness that's inside of me that's basically telling me what to do.
Were you in a kind of meditation or conversation?
Yeah, I sleep too. I go to sleep. And then I wake up, and then I hear music. Yeah.
Did I just ask how where you premiered with the premiere, but we played on
request of the Borealis as how the history year, one movement, a big movement too of Remembering Steel Skies Ray Tears, which was a BIOF movement, by the movement quartet, that we performed that, or the Borealis performed that here in 2024. And I'm wondering if you see any relationship, because that, or if you could explain what that piece was about, and if there is any relationship or perhaps contrast.
Well, that's interesting. That's also a string quartet, and it's actually contradicts what I just said it completely contradicts what I just said. My father worked with Holocaust survivors, and so I met, the first one I met was Peter Gary. After my father died, I wanted to meet the people he worked with. And so they were child survivors of the Holocaust, and we did what I call a kind of a theater of fire performance, where it was not like a normal classical performance. It's like we had all sorts of different kinds of music and multimedia and put there. But the most important thing that happened was just to interview people and get their very human stories about their survival and what they went through. And then I wrote the subsequent 5-movement quartet. And that was based directly on what they said. So it came out of my imagination in response to their stories. And so one of them is called A Dream of Lost Words, and it's based on this beautiful person called Robbie Wiseman, who he talks about the death of his brother. And they're in a slave labor camp, and his brother gets typhoid. And so the Nazis just took him onto a truck and a whole bunch of people out into the woods and then shot them all. And then the truck came back, and he regrets what he didn't say to his brother. So that's why I had that there. And the music that I created is about being haunted by that memory. So it's like, it's a dream. The dream, it comes back over and over again, and you're haunted by it. he dealt with that incredibly beautiful by being an incredibly generous person. So that's an example where you can have an extra musical kind of experience or something that can inspire music to be written very directly.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was an intensely useful was emotional. He's
The scholarship thing that was born by so I can't imagine that would be it's brought up by us.
You should work in the middle one user section to allow it. So in the better. And that's will be asking the educator.
on. Thank you.